Okay, so it looks like I am indeed live, and today I will be testing out the new DLC units for the Lizardmen and the Beastmen, along with playing some custom battles with good old ice power on a Rubber Duck of War's stream. So I will be putting in timestamps after the fact so that you guys can jump to whichever section you want. And with that out of the way, I can start going over all of these crazy new units. So should be pretty good. Just doing one last check to make sure I'm not breaking any rules for what I'm allowed to reveal. But yes, it looks like I am good to go. So sweet. Let's start off with some Lizardmen unit looking at. We got the Skink Oracle. This guy, he has Fireball, he has Earthblood. What's not to love? Oh wait, he costs 3,000 gold. And even if you take off a bunch of abilities, he's still very expensive. That's because he's on a Troglodon. But otherwise, he performs the same as a Troglodon, he's just a caster. So there's not a whole ton of testing that could really be done there. As for, let's see here, the Coatl, we got, I'll be playing around with that. Its stealth mechanics are fairly straightforward, same with its spells. But interestingly, if we look at, where is it? Something that's really fun that I'll show in a bit. The Spastilodon, Arc of Sotek. It basically has Poison Wind as its ground effect now. It's insane. But yeah, let's go ahead and get some people depressed, because we'll start off with some fun cavalry changes. Let's go ahead and take a spellcaster, and then we'll take some wild riders, and they're gonna be abused a little bit today, even more than usual. It's gonna be sad, but yeah, this should be quite revealing. FNG, fellow rules creator in chat, welcome. I will be going over a couple of units, maybe my thoughts on where they should be placed, but of course, more testing is always warranted before you actually get into anything, so none of my opinions are really set in stone. Now, first things first, the Cavalry Bug. Let's go ahead and slow this down so it's normal speed. If you got great weapons, Bestigor Herd charging Wild Riders, you can see here, I think the AI stopped the charge. These guys were supposed to take damage. What is going on? What just happened? The AI just stopped charging. But nevertheless, I think it more or less proves its point. Although I guess Bestigor Herd do have some pretty good stats. The AI is going for a second charge, and now the Wild Riders are effectively dead. So that actually went a lot differently than I would have expected. But essentially, it seems like the Cavalry Bug is still in the game. At least from preliminary testing. So that's test number 1. Test number 2 on Wild Rider abuse. We see Lizardmen versus Wood Elves fairly often in the current meta. But the Lizardmen have a new unit. I'm sure you've seen it before in other content creator videos. The dreaded Chameleon Skinks. Now, the vote is sort of up on how good these guys are, and whether or not they're 360, and whether or not they are ranged. Now, I will go and quickly say that their missiles, if you take a look at this, the missile damage does more than an Ungor Raider arrow. Very important to note. It does the same amount of damage, but more AP. Maybe like a little bit less damage, but nevertheless, it has 3 times the AP value. And its explosion damage is equal to blasting charges. So if you feel like Ungor Raiders are ranged, and you feel like blasting charges are ranged, it's a fairly strong argument. But that doesn't matter if it doesn't change anything in practice, and I'm going to test these guys out versus Wild Riders. So we have Fire at Will on, and these guys can retreat while shooting. And not only that, because their missiles hit like Ungor Raider arrows, they do a lot more than your typical minor blasting charge. And you can see here, using up all their ammunition, he brought these Wild Riders down to almost half HP, getting 440 value before they even see actual combat. Now, this is the most optimal situation, and it's not exactly like you're going to be seeing this happen all the time. But I think the argument for putting them as a non-range unit, if these guys weren't 360 and they weren't ranged, you would see 5 of these guys with Chameleon skinks, and they would be able to effectively kite cavalry pretty well. I experienced it firsthand in some testing, but still, all of this is subject to change, and none of this is conclusive. So don't start panicking yet. We can do that in a bit, but let's take a quick look at how well these guys do against single entities, specifically low armored single entities. If we have an eagle here, actually most of the shots do miss, so it does look like she does a bit better. I might need to do a different test where the shots land a bit better, but nevertheless, when they do get a good volley off, you can see, even missing quite a few of their shots, 1 unit of skinks brought an Eagle Lord down to about 2/3 HP with misses. So if all of the shots had connected, that Eagle could have been even lower. All important to note, but the general idea is that you don't want to be running into these guys with your big expensive units. Cheap cavalry will do good, but another showcase of their power. If I put this Beast Lord on a Tuskor chariot, which we will get into in a second, we will see. We will see how this does. So let's take a look at this new skink unit against a Beast Lord on a chariot. Now this chariot, it's relatively high armor, 80, nothing insane. He'll still be taking damage, but it should be reduced. However, if we actually do this in testing, let's take a quick look, and you can see that when all the missiles hit, it is pretty devastating. So these skinks managed to get the Beast Lord below half HP, and they got their missiles off. Not only that, when they're running away, they can still fire. So all very important things to consider, but that's enough about the new skink unit. We can go ahead now and play around with some Tuskor chariots. Now this is the test that really showed some possible issues. I'm gonna take these guys with no abilities because it turns out the unit itself doesn't really need many buffs to do well. So let's go ahead and just take a Helman Gorse, why don't we? Take off his abilities and take a unit of Blood Knights. We'll see how well this does. Did you see the turn video where 2 Tuskor chariots stripped down could take on 3 Blood Knights? I didn't, but I saw the video get posted, and I'll be showing something similar right now. So let's go ahead and just put this unit right here. I'm gonna drive him right into some Blood Knights, and we're gonna see 1 Tuskor chariot trades about evenly with Blood Knights, which is pretty terrifying, I gotta say. If you take a look at the AI, they're cycle charging as much as they can, but this guy more or less trades evenly. Now the Blood Knights, they do have about 1/3 of their HP left, but given that this Blood Knights are supposed to counter this guy, it's obviously pretty crazy. Now what else? For comparison against Blood Knights, just so that we have a good understanding here, here's a Saurus Scar Veteran, anti-large, unlike the Tuskor, armor piercing, and this guy, he costs more than the Tuskor chariot. So in theory, we would expect the Saurus Scar Veteran to do better here. He's a smaller model too, so fewer Blood Knights can attack him at the same time, and this should be a decent comparison in terms of strength. So let's get the Scar Veteran over here, dive him in right towards the Blood Knights, and we'll see how it goes. Hello, Leslie. Yeah, good timing indeed. Now, this Scar Veteran costs 100 more than the Tuskor chariot, and he managed to do about 1/5 of the damage. So, wow, I didn't expect him to do that badly, but it is a little bit telling, I gotta say. In fact, in testing, the units that do as well as Tuskor chariots tend to cost about 2,000 gold, which means that they are performing about twice as well as other big monstrous units. Does it work the same way with Razor Gore mounts? Well, this is important to test because allegedly Razor Gore mounts were also changed in a similar way to how other things were changed, or to how other chariots were changed. I think the boar chariots for greenskins were also changed. So let's see if it has the similar issue. Possibly. This is a test that I haven't done yet. So let's go ahead and try it out. At Enticity, got any ideas how such obvious bugs get overlooked? Yeah, I haven't done game development before, but in general, developers are basically always rushing to, wow, look at this guy. Look at this guy, what a beast. Anyways, these, like, in development, you can't just always focus on bugs. It's more about getting the actual product out, and sometimes bugs are missed. Sometimes you know about them and you choose not to fix them. I think in this case, it could be either way. Maybe it was planned to be fixed, or maybe they were unaware. But it's pretty easy to overlook things in development. And we can see here in prolonged combat, this Wargore on a chariot also beats the Blood Knights about trading evenly. And if you take a look at the pricing, he did have this ability here, but obviously he is much cheaper than Blood Knights, which is pretty freaky. Pretty freaky indeed. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the Ghorgon now. Let's start off with the ROR. This unit, to really showcase it, I think it would be best if we set it up against two of the scariest monsters in the game. Two Stegodons, one of the most cost-efficient monsters you can possibly take on the Lizardmen roster, even with the DLC possibly. We'll see how well the Ghorgon does against two Stegodons, getting 2v1, but the prices are about the same, so you would expect the two to trade about evenly here. Since this is the last DLC for Warhammer 2, asks Leslie, are you excited for Warhammer 3 news that will come after release? I am insanely hyped for Warhammer 3. In fact, I'm thinking about putting out daily videos again. I might put out single videos about, like, you know, just a single replay of a game that I played or something like that. I feel like that would be pretty fun. Now, taking a look at the Ghorgon, it does have regeneration, frenzy, and when it's in combat for a long time, it gets a second frenzy, which is pretty insane. And you can see here against two Stegodons, it's actually doing fairly good. It doesn't get knocked down a ton, although sometimes it will. But against two Stegodons, its HP only went down to half. And against the second Stegodon, it will likely be able to beat that too, based on previous results. And there we go. Performing slightly better than last time I tested it, but a very strong single entity. And I would say it puts Beastmen in a completely different tier than they were before. It is, yeah, Beastmen can go hard on single entity monster builds now. And that's going to be a little bit, that's game changing. Beastmen essentially will be, will sort of be like Lizardmen in terms of how well they do single entity damage. So you gotta be real careful about that. In fact, I think kiting might be the best option against Beastmen. Now the Jabberslythe, this guy, he is very interesting in that he is a destroyer of formations. Essentially, this guy has infinite mass. And hopefully I'll be able to showcase this to you with his animations. So he can be very hard to catch in melee and sometimes very hard to shoot too. Although not the best combatant, his pure disruption potential is insane. What tier do I think Beastmen are going to be? Probably very good. I'm technically not allowed to do full reviews of the DLC, but I think Beastmen will be in a really nice position, especially if they don't fix these chariot bugs. But you see he has a nice charge animation, pretty cool. But if I tell him to attack this unit over here, he activates his charge animation again. If I tell him to attack this unit of spears that's very far away, it's another charge animation, and he just easily leaves these Saurus spears that would otherwise be fairly massive. If you see, if I just try to walk this guy past Saurus spears, you can see here he gets bogged down like any other unit. Fairly normal and something that would be expected. But if I want him to escape, I simply target a unit that is not in the fight, and you can see here. Let's see if I target these guys. He should be able to get the charge animation. There we go. And then he will escape freely. Not to mention, this can also push other single entities, like black coaches and so on. And that has a fairly large effect on this guy. And you can see, even with an army of anti-large here, he still gets decent damage. He barely takes any damage himself. And he can obviously cause a lot of disruption. So that's going to be pretty crazy, and you might see that today in my games against Ice Power. How does Taurox compare to a Ghorgon in terms of against monsters? Well, this can be dusted. So Taurox actually has a bunch of melee attack buffs and a brass body, which is similar to Lucky Banner, but sadly not as good because it does not regenerate in combat. Now, for comparison, we will be taking the dreaded Grom, one of the best duelist lords in the current meta, to see how Taurox compares to a Ghorgon. I forgot to take a Ghorgon, but whatever. I'll take it after the loading screen. Now, here we go. We got Taurox. Now, he does do fire damage, so that will actually sway the results. Whoopsie daisies, but here we go against Grom. They're both gonna proc their lucky banners, and Grom, as the AI, generally tries to cycle charge. But you can see here, Taurox, he does have fairly good speed, and in this case, Grom wasn't getting any cycle charges. It's not exactly the most conclusive results, but nevertheless, it's a decent showing on time. You know what? I'll take Grom and an Arachnorok spider. This is a combination that you will sometimes see if we're talking about single entities, and we'll see how Taurox can 1v2 in this situation and how the Ghorgon will 1v2 here. It's so weird seeing Beastmen have so many Lord options. Yeah, it's crazy. I think Malagor too actually is Malagor. He's actually a decent fighter. He is so fast. He can more or less cycle charge and pick and choose his engagements properly. Pretty crazy. Now Taurox, he does have an AoE ability that mostly goes unused, but we'll still see. And you can see now the AI just totally messing up this test. Come on, AI. But if we take a look at Taurox, he's actually not doing that great versus this Arachnorok spider. I'm not sure exactly why, actually. He has a lot of AP, but this Arachnorok spider is sort of beating him up pretty badly. Unfortunately for Taurox. Now we'll ignore the fact that Grom is giving this test a hard time. But if we rematch here, we'll see how the Ghorgon does in similar situations. This is something I haven't actually tested yet, but I feel like the Ghorgon might be scarier just because of its damage output. Taurox, he doesn't have he has pretty good damage, but it's nothing super insane. I guess you might want to be cycle charging him. But the Ghorgon does have anti-large, unlike Taurox, and that might help it out here. Plus its melee attack is way higher. Jeez. Its anti-large melee attack is 100. But if we take a look at the actual fight, it does seem a little bit squishier. It is getting knocked down too. And honestly, I think they're both okay. But they're not going to be breaking the game or anything. Especially compared to how well two of the new chariots do. And actually, you know what? Just for the fun of it, let's see how well 2 chariots actually do in this situation. So, Taurox and the Ghorgon do eventually lose there. But if we take 2 Wargors with no abilities, will they be able to win a similar test? We will see in just a second. Yes, in that battle, the Ghorgon was spending a lot of time on the ground. Sometimes it gets knocked down, sometimes it doesn't. When it doesn't, it generally does quite well. But I think in general, you don't have to worry about it too much. Although it will be definitely annoying when it does happen. Now here we go. The tag team battle. You got 2 chariots here. And they're going to be facing off against an Arachnarok spider. And you can see here, they actually lose. Look at that. The chariots aren't as OP as you might have thought. In fact, these guys, they generally, even though they may or may not be broken, the big downside to them is that they actually just don't do a lot of damage to very high HP units. So like, I guess mammoths and Arachnarok spiders will generally do well, but you still have to be a bit careful. Although I would say that went fairly well, so maybe greenskins is accounted to beastmen chariots we've all been looking for. So there we go. Also, yes, the Ghorgon can't hide apparently. More testing than we are finding out just now. Now, those are those units. I'm sure you guys already know Jabberslythe has its AoE sort of mortis effect when your leadership is low. But let's go into some fun Lizardmen units now. They added a new unit called the Bastiladon Ark of Sotek. You might be saying Enticity. What are you talking about? That's not a new unit. That's been in the game for ages now, and it's terrible. Well, I'm here to tell you guys that it is one of the best units just ever against elite infantry. If you guys thought Poison Wind was strong, wait until you see this bad boy. Because the Ark of Sotek got a bit of a rework. You may have already heard about it. But it's actually insane. And I feel like we might actually see an Ark of Sotek. We might see Arks of Sotek be taken a lot more than usual. So here are some Black Orcs. These guys are going to beat the brakes off the Ark of Sotek. And thank you, Black Phillip. Thank you. Now, I'm going to proc its AoE, and we're going to see here, it drops down. And before, it would just do a little bit of damage for all the units that are inside. But now it's actually applying this debuff over here, Sotek's Poison, that will hit the units as a whole, instead of just the units that are inside that little circle. So you can see these Black Orcs here. They are well outside of it, and still getting hit by the poison. And even after the AoE goes away, it stays on the Black Orcs, and over its full duration, you can see both units of Black Orcs they're missing 1/3 of their HP. And just like that, this Ark of Sotek has about 700 gold value. Now, that is one ability, and it almost paid for itself. Plus, it will be coming back in 30 seconds, and it is actually insane versus elite infantry. I feel like this could be really big, but who knows? Maybe I'm just going crazy here. But definitely, like, you know, against vampire counts, it's gonna be terrifying. Like, you know, we can even test this out. If we take, take a look at the vampire counts here, usually against lizardmen, they will have at least multiple units blobbing up at the same time. Of course, this thing is not nearly as good against... it's not nearly as good against... Oh, what am I trying to say? Against large targets. So it's not exactly a Stegodon, but the AoE is just insanely good anti-infantry. And we'll see how much damage they can do against this fairly large vampire counts build. Did you see the new AoE magic buffs for things like Final Transmutation and Soul Stealer? What? I'm the one that showed it. I'm sure other people have showcased that, but yeah, I have indeed seen it. All right, so if we take a look at these guys, if we just rush them straight into Graveguard and then use their AoEs, and then just sit around for a second. Okay, so this was like the worst case scenario here for both of these units, just diving straight at the enemy and using their AoE, and look at that. One of them got 1,000 gold value against this army. Think about that, guys. It paid for itself suiciding into the army. Insane. What is this? Oh my gosh. Okay, well that is actually significant. I did not expect them to do this well, but there you go. Does it stack? I don't think it does. But wow. I actually really did not expect that. That's crazy. Very good to know, especially because it didn't even use its full duration. Jeez. Oh my gosh, these guys are going to be the ultimate just destroyers of vampire accounts. You can just not blob against them. Yes, but we've seen against Black Orcs, they can get their value off onto them. And they're definitely a threat. The fact that they force you not to blob on top of them means that they could very well be a useful unit as we head on into the new meta that will be befalling us. Now, what other units are there to test? We got the Oxyotl, but it more or less does as well as it does on paper. For those of you that are hyped about the Feral Troglodyte and compare it to the Carnosaur, you might be thinking, wait a second, this unit has the same stats as the Carnosaur, and it has a ranged attack that does 900 damage every 10 seconds. But sadly, it does not have the anti-large of the Carnosaur, nor does it have the Frenzy. So even though this guy is still fairly good, like most of the time compared to a Carno, I might just want to take the Carnosaur. Its range isn't that crazy. But who knows? Who knows? I'm sure people will find a use for it. And we got this guy that can give 24 melee attack in an AoE. Sort of Barona's Time Warp there. Could be pretty fun. Buff stacking. Shenanigans. Always around. And is that more or less it? That seems like it's more or less it. Oh yeah, I forgot the TLC lords. This guy right here is pretty crazy. He has this blowpipe with infinite casts of magic missiles. He can go into unspottable mode, which makes him very hard to actually find in the middle of a battle. Essentially, if you knock him away with a single entity, he will you won't be able to find him again, and you'll have to go out of your way to track him down. But it sort of makes sense for the Lord. But very quickly, let's go ahead and see how much damage this guy does to a Blood Dragon Lord. Some of his abilities can do surprisingly well. But yeah, I'm definitely going to be running Arc of Sotek. There's no way I'm not. It's so... oh my gosh. It's just, it's a crazy poison wind AoE on the ground. And it doesn't affect allies. Very important to note. So this guy right here, we're going to stealth him up. So this Blood Dragon Lord can't actually see him. And that will allow him to actually get fairly close here in just a second. And then if we cast his... and you can see he's actually not spottable right now. This Dragon Lord misses him completely. And there we go. We shot one ability at the Dragon Lord and he lost about 1000 HP. Think about that. This ability is equal to an overcast Soul Quench. That is more than 10 winds of magic, I think, every 2 minutes. Not game-breaking insane, but it's definitely pretty good. And over the course of the game, you can pretty easily snipe lords with that ability. Not to mention, this guy will be staying alive very easily. So I think he may very well be a terror. Hey, Ice Power, we have a match in like 5 minutes, right? Should be pretty good. Can you check the Troglodon spit damage? I can indeed. For those of you guys wanting to take a look at this new unit, I'll take the new Caster Lord since he has the same stats as the Troglodon. Or at least basically the same stats. You think I broke the AI? No, actually, the AI couldn't see Oxyotl. That's the crazy part. He just did not know where he was. No Beastmen Chariots. I'll let you take Beastmen Chariots, Ice Power. I have strats to beat them. Honestly, they may be broken, but against Arachnarok spiders, they actually still lose. So perhaps your favorite faction may still be the counter to them. Now here we go, Troglodon, spit number 1. Not a lot of damage. There we go, spit number 2. It's, you know, it's nothing crazy. Over the course of a battle, this will do pretty well, but taking a look at the actual range, it's only 120. And usually these guys are going to get engaged. Now they do have fairly good stats, but they don't have the anti-large of a Carnosaur. So single entities will more happily go up in a fight against them. But if we take a look, if we just throw down some buffs on these guys, they do like hold fairly well against Blood Dragon Lords. Actually, he's faring very well against his Blood Dragon Lord. Look at this guy. Oh my gosh. But yeah, I would say their range attack is more of a bonus, but otherwise you treat them more like a Carnosaur, really. He did pretty good. Now the AI of course didn't micro the Blood Dragon Lord properly, didn't use the abilities well enough, but I think that's still fine. Oh no, it sees Oxyotl. Oh, it's fine, he got shot to death. But yeah, it does fairly well. Spamming out attacks all game, of course, is going to have very good value, but you still have to be a bit careful with them. But otherwise, they're very similar to a Carnosaur. On the charge, too, they should have similar charge bonuses. Yeah, they both have 50 charge bonus, so it's not bad. It feels like another cool unit for sure. Call seemed to think that the 750 gold chariot had the same bug too. Very interesting. Yeah, Ice Power, you know, I think for now, instead of just banning all the chariots, it's a better showcase to use them. And I have ideas on how to beat them, but if you don't want me to use them, I won't. But I do want to try out some ideas now. Here we go. We are shifting the stream now to the glorious multiplayer battle. The first one that we'll be showing on my channel. And it's gonna be a best of 7 versus Ice Power. Look at that. This should be very fun. As long as we don't just throw all of the games and then this best of 7 lasts 2 seconds. But I don't think that will be the case. So here we go. Who's picking first? Well, so thanks. So apparently Rubber Duck of War tuning into the stream without my knowing. Oh, he said Arc of Sotek Heart earlier. I completely missed him. I'm so sorry, Rubber Duck. I'm so sorry. Do noble chariots have the same bug? The bugs seem to be of a different nature, but it has the same effect where we're seeing the units sort of overperform for what you might expect at their price point. All right, so sweet. We're up against Ice Power, and we'll see who's picking first. I'm thinking like Lizardmen first pick is fairly good, and I would first pick Beastmen, but they're a little bit bugged right now, so I don't know if I will take them. But it seems like Ice Power doesn't want to see the chariots, which is totally understandable, and might be able to make do without. Maybe I'll go for the Razor Gores instead of the Tusk Gores, since the pricing seems to be done a little bit better there. But otherwise, the other single entities are quite terrifying. Now, cool. Let's see who's picking first. It seems like it is still undecided. Only take the chariots. Oh man, I would love to if it wasn't so bad mannered. As much as I want to showcase how strong they are, just to prove a point, you gotta respect the choices of your opponent. It is the honorable thing to do. Have you seen the anthem of the Ultramarines? I have not. Or have I heard the anthem of the Ultramarines? I have not. But maybe I'll take a look at that later if you're not memeing. All right. So we still don't know who's picking first. But here we go, Rubber Duck. He's in chat, he's picking the map. And it looks like I am picking first. Sweet. All right, so I could go Lizardmen. If I do, Beastmen are actually pretty scary. And I'm sort of in the mood for not getting run over by Beastmen today. They do destroy Paladins. Like no one's business. And I could go Wood Elves. Let's see, if I go for Wood Elves, usually, you know, I'm not too worried about Dwarves, but take a look at the usual bands. It could be against High Elves. It could be against the dreaded, well, Lizardmen too are actually a little bit of a worse matchup nowadays. So honestly, that's a little bit scary too. Is there any faction that is unaffected by the Lizardmen changes? That's what I must know. Perhaps Greenskins are still terrifying? Maybe I will. Maybe for the memes, I will go Greenskins. Let's see. But is there anything else that is unaffected by Beastmen and Lizardmen being a lot more scary? Dark Elves would already be banning Beastmen and Lizardmen, but also Greenskins are still scary too. Perhaps the Empire just to kickstart this. And then if I face Lizardmen, we will just make do. Not a bad choice. Ice Power might go Dark Elves here, but I think this could go okay. Against the new Beastmen, Empire could do decently too. So let's try it out. Let's try it out. Empire has always been a very nice generalist faction, so they never hurt too much in general. I think I will ban out the... Honestly, I could see Lizardmen or Beastmen. Of course, Lizardmen have been a little bit scary for Empire in the past. But yeah, I think because of that, I will ban Lizardmen. And what else? Tomb King's Coast counts. Chaos. I think Ice Power is likely going to play Vampire Coast here. I guess Lizardmen and... Ooh, and Bretonia? That should be fine. CA should give Luminarch the same bug stats as the new chariot. Oh, that'd be hilarious. Oh, and Ice Power is going for dwarves. Wonderful. Thankfully, I do have an Empire build here to cheese out the dwarves. So I'm not particularly worried, but perhaps Ice Power is going to be using the new rune system to cause me some trouble. Maybe even some gyrocopter spam. We will have to see. But I do got some nifty Empire builds to showcase. Where is it? Here we go. Here we go. Look at this sweet build. 0 spend, thankfully. We got Boris in the air. We got 10 range units burning heads for days. And then a little bit of cavalry to chase down the poor Dowie. Very fun build. Very fun build. You thought I had forgotten about dwarves. Instead, I'm just mad. The poor dwarves, guys. The poor dwarves. The runes got nerfed. I'm pretty sure the runes actually got nerfed. For the bonus of a bit more versatility. I think dwarves are definitely stronger than they were before. But they are not exactly a terror, especially if you consider the chariots and the much stronger single entities. They sadly do not do as well as I would have hoped, but I think they will still be a pickable faction, especially for all the dwarf mains out there. There's a lot of experimentation that can be done, so that should be very exciting. And plus, some matchups might change. For example, the speed boost that these guys will get could very well hunt down all my range units with slayers, and that would be very bad. You're very curious to see how this build will work. Well, the idea is if he goes for a range or melee build, I will simply kite him, and if he goes for range units, the fact that I have Burning Head will win me those engagements. Burning Head does well against dwarves if you're hitting rangers, specifically because they have very low armor. It is an insanely fun build. Yeah, this one's great, guys. Got Boris just flying around, regenerating, poking away. So it should be good. I swear all dwarf mains are mad scientists. I think so. I've dabbled in the Dowie ways, but I don't experiment nearly as much as them. Most of the time I'm actually copying builds and playstyles, just because it saves me a lot of time. And although it can be harsh for the poor dwarves that work so hard on their crafts, much like creatures in Warhammer lore, you will often see creatures stealing dwarf items and using them to their own benefit. Sadly, that is just the way things are now. Here we go. My formation is more or less done at this point. Strangely enough, yeah, this is all I really need to do. You go extremely wide. Let's see, his army is very big actually, so that'll be interesting. But yeah, here we go. You go extremely wide, and then you pray that the great swords will keep your range unit safe. And that's it. We're done. Amazing. Look at this build. Should be great. Now, dwarf speed wounds are going to be a pain. Gyrocopters possibly a pain, but I do have Boris, so I'm not nearly as scared as I would normally be for other Empire builds. If it is a full infantry rush, we have a ton of infantry of our own, and we should be able to effectively kite the dwarves, just because they are quite a bit slower. At Enticity, looking forward to a specific race in Warhammer 3, the Ogre Kingdoms and the Chaos Dwarves. Those are like by far my most hyped factions to see. And it seems like, given the fact that Ogre Kingdoms were added to Game 2, it seems like they're going to be on their way for Game 3. Like, if I had to make a bet, I would feel like they would do that, but who knows. Here we go, game number 1 against Ice Power, bringing in the fun Empire build of guns. We're gonna scoot up forwards, and thankfully he has no artillery, which is very good for me. He has actually mostly dwarf warriors with great weapons and blasting charges, which is very standard when dwarves are expecting a rush, and actually very good for me, because he does not have a lot that can actually deal with this. Not a lot at all, actually, so all I gotta do now is stand, hands off the keyboard, and just do a bit of stretching, let my gun line get ready to fire, and then now I can actually go back into the game. So going to see these quarrelers. They will be getting in range in just a second. They're not really too much of a threat though, as I can back up with these range units. Starting right now, Boris is going to be cycle charging these poor guys as much as possible, and then the cavalry should be able to do well too. Here we go, the quarrelers, they do loose their first volley off, getting in a decent amount of damage. Some thunderers are doing a bit of damage to Boris too, and I will have to evacuate out of that situation. But let's just continue kiting. We're going to be pulling away the forces of Ice Power here. And once his forces spread out a little bit thin, I should be able to do much better here. So I'm going to go for these blasting charges here along the side, while the center units just continue kiting away. There's no real need for them to engage, really. A few blasting charges do come out, though, and it doesn't do too much damage, so that's actually fairly good. And the cavalry, they're going to be assisting here quite a bit. These range units can finish off the miners, and these guys will just continue running away. And there we go, Boris has landed. So those miners will be dealt with, and as the numbers grow thin for ice power, I will be feeling more and more confident being able to pick apart separate units. So there's some dwarf warriors over here, and they will be getting finished off. And then soon my great swords should be able to do quite a bit of damage here also. These guys will just continue running away. You definitely don't want to be getting hit by the blasting charges at all, as they will get insane amounts of value against your troops. But here we go, that's a unit of miners now down, and then the cavalry can deal with these quarrelers. Meanwhile, my infantry needs to continue retreating. And let's see, I just really want to get some burning heads down. If I can get some great swords on top of these Dowie forces, that would be amazing. But we'll see. We'll see if I can do that. Meanwhile, over here, looks like my cavalry is doing absolutely great. And given that my right flank is doing so well, the goal actually is going to be playing the avoidance game on my other flank. That should do much better for me, as I really do not want to be losing too many units here. So some great swords, they should actually win against the miners here, I think. And over on this side, yep, the right flank is still doing very well. Meanwhile, Boris, he's running disruption here. Some of my great swords actually are pulled away in the wrong direction. That's a bit unfortunate, but I can start getting some burning heads down onto these units. That should do some work, although it seems like I'm actually going to be losing Boris here. And that would be very bad. He does rout off, but he's not exactly dead yet. But he will be getting quite low, as these Thunderers will actually be getting in quite a bit of damage on top of him. Meanwhile, it seems like my knights are getting cut up a tiny bit by these dwarven forces. That's definitely not good. And as long as Boris doesn't shatter here, I'm okay, but there's a good chance that he will. And that could end the game for me here. But with a little bit of juking, perhaps I can save him. He does rout off for a second time, but apparently he doesn't, strangely enough. He actually just continues chugging along for a bit, allowing me to micro a tiny bit longer, which does help me out. And it seems like, thankfully, I will be able to save Boris, and that will help me out a lot. Now these guys are going to be wheeling around, trying to get into a better position to support this force over here that has done well for itself so far. These rangers are going to be a bit annoying until I can get some great swords on top of them, but that's going to be the plan, and hopefully I'm able to shut them down. Not to mention Boris will be able to come in here too and hopefully assist quite a bit. And given that these forces are now pulling closer to the center, it actually gives me a lot more space to micro here. So with all that out of the way, I think I'm in a fairly good position now. And despite a couple flubs, now that the dwarf formations are beginning to crumble, it will just get easier and easier for me to kite as the game goes on. So I'm actually feeling very comfortable now. Boris can dive in directly onto these quarrelers. And ammunition is still, thankfully, very high for my troops. Absolutely great. And we just got to end out this game now. And also try to conserve ammunition where I can, since that can actually be a little bit of an issue if you're not careful. The great swords aren't nearly as important though, as I can more or less just for the great swords I can more or less send them in and they will trade cost effectively as long as they don't get shot to death. So that should be fine. I still have a hefty amount of ranged, and these ranged units over here will be eating a burning head soon enough. The miners over here on the side sort of splitting off, same with the dwarf warriors, will actually allow me to get some free hits on top of them. And then that should work out very well. There's not a lot to really commentate here other than, you know, I'm just kiting. The usual, guys. One interesting thing to note is that these dwarf rune casters here will be getting in some pretty nice value on my forces with their various speed boosts and so on. But nothing that I'm especially worried about at this current point in time. The fact that it is mostly just range units left for ice power is a very good sign for me. And these dwarf warriors should be going down very soon too. I'll just be waiting for them to crest the hill before I actually take an engagement against them. And these guys over here will just be continuing to distract as well as they can. But a free pick on dwarf warriors is definitely great for me. And once my caster gets into position, he'll be able to get some pretty nice work in. Taking a quick stock of my ammunition too. It looks like I will have enough ammo to finish off the dwarves here, but not a ton to actually continue to just fire willy-nilly with all of my units. So I will be trying to conserve a bit of ammunition by chasing off these dwarf warriors with some cavalry instead of using my ranged firepower to do so. These guys in the meantime will be continuing to run away. The bane of dwarves is long legs, and I will be abusing that against ice power today. Yeah, Boris surviving is huge. I can't believe that he managed to make it, but that definitely helped quite a bit. The fact that I have a full HP greatsword too will be great against the rest of these slayers if they do rush me. So I'm feeling very confident here. So the goal right now, oh Boris, you need to be assisting the army. So the goal right now, I need to form my gun line, you know, Total War Napoleon style. And then trying to get a nice concave on these range units here. And then after that, I can shut them down by essentially throwing down a burning head, forcing them to re-maneuver. And then I should be able to win it. So here we go, the gun line is forming up. And in just a second, I'll be able to rush in. These guys have very little support too. So it's a really great situation for me. And if they do shoot, they will be eating a fairly big burning head. So let's go ahead and see. The moment they start firing is when I will let go of my left click. And there we go. You can see a bit of a readjustment, and there we go. They do fire. So that's great. Burning head is going to drop. That's going to force them to reposition. And as they do, you can see a massive volley of my ranged firepower comes on in on top of them. And it's a terrible trade for the dwarves. Absolutely great for me though. And I can simply push forwards now to get that advantage going. Meanwhile, I do have my greatswords to stop the dwarves from actually moving towards me. And I'll just be making it as hard as possible for them to get good value. Now, there are some thunderers over here. Boris will want to be trying to dodge those shots as much as he can. And actually, he's going to pull back because those guys are a little bit too much of a problem. And I don't want to take too much damage on Boris so that he can kill off the runesmiths at the end of the fight. Still though, I do have a superior firepower here. And this bright wizard with his mobility and his fireballs down the line will make it very hard for these thunderers to get good value. In fact, I can throw down a burning head, but it looks like they are repositioning here. I will instead target the these quarrelers instead. And in fact, this bright wizard, he can actually go into melee and cause some disruption there too. So that should be helping me out. But it seems like ammunition is beginning to run a little bit low. And I'll have to be a bit careful there. Boris is taking some free damage too. And I will want to get my knights grouped up with the rest of my forces if I want to do well here. I have routed off one of the quarrelers though. That is great for me. And these thunderers, I'm simply waiting for them to stop moving so that I can throw down another burning head. And there we go. It seems like they do stall to fire. And this time they actually pull forwards, which is great for me because now I can move in with my range units to shut them down. These thunderers are getting a little bit out of position too. And I should be able to get some nice value on top of them simply by firing down. This is Ungrim Iron Fist. Very interesting pick actually. But he's not especially scary since I have so much ranged that can finish him off here. So now that I have the infantry advantage, I will be pushing forwards with my great swords. to try and finish off these dwarf range units. And then I need Boris to take to the flanks to shut down these gun lines. Basically, as much disruption on the dwarf gun line as possible, because they do have the superior shields that help them in these gunfights. So it's very important that I take my advantages where I can. And by forcing them to move, it allows me to get a lot more shots in on top of them. And here we go. They're trying to get another volley off on these great swords, but the great swords should be able to take them out. And this seems like a good burning head situation too. These thunderers are looking the wrong direction, and as the burning head drops, it looks like I will be able to rout off those thunderers, which is quite big for me. These quarrelers will be off the battlefield in just a second, and I'm going to turn off fire at will now so that I can really maximize the efficiency on my ammunition here, because actually that is beginning to run fairly low, and I need to make sure that I have enough to deal with Ungrim in the late game. Otherwise, I'm definitely very screwed. And look at that, some of these thunderers actually do manage to come back into battle, which is definitely not great for me, but Boris does manage to get them to rout, thankfully. And at this point, it's simply the task of escorting these forces off the battlefield. I do still have 2 units of, not thunderers, but handgunners left to deal with the forces. And then for these guys, I'll put them on a new hotkey since they are out of ammunition and won't be good for any future gun lines. But as soon as these range units are off the battlefield, it means that I can simply kite with these last 5 range units. Where's this guy? All the way over here? Yeah, I'll be able to kite with the last few range units and I'll be good to go. This runesmith too, he only has the rune of speed, which although good is not going to be saving the dwarves anytime soon. Now let's just go ahead and make sure that we're in close range before we're firing. This is a good ammo saving tactic since you will have more accuracy the closer you are. And nice, we routed off the first unit of handgunners. The quarrelers are more or less dealt with. And these guys are going to be getting into position probably to shoot these probably need to kill off the heroes. Let's see, I'll get the handgunners to shoot the heroes and my quarrelers to shoot these dwarf warriors, and then I'll begin kiting away. But I really want to be killing off the heroes here. They are pretty scary. Now that's a rune of speed that was thrown down on the dwarf warriors, but you can see here the speed buff, it only brings them up to 38 speed, and despite that my troops have 33. And this is sort of the pain that dwarves will run into, is that even with the speed buff, they actually still can't catch units, which is probably the saddest thing in the world. With such a big speed buff, it still just is not very effective, and I'll just be pulling away here to safety. I have a few great swords too that will be able to enter combat in just a second, but at the moment I'm just trying to pull the dwarves away to get a good kite going, and these guys are just getting in some free damage while I do that. So all in all, I'm feeling very good here, and I can probably rout off this unit of great weapons with a single volley from my handgunners. Still though, ammunition is very low. And you know what? Ammunition is low enough where I'm going to take my handgunners and put them on the 1 hotkey to make sure that I really don't screw myself over against Ungrim, who would be doing a lot of damage to me if I'm not careful. And there we go. We'll be pulling back, getting Boris into position, getting my great swords on top of these slayers. And they do trade fairly well in this situation. I do have some cavalry over here. And my archers are bogging down these forces quite a bit. And now I can use these quarrelers to shoot at the dwarf units. Plus I have a fireball. I can shoot this at the runesmith to sort of just shoot straight down the line of these dwarf warriors. Although my caster does bug out a tiny bit and charge forwards, I will have to get him out of there, as obviously that's a very bad position for him to be in. Let's go ahead and get my range units in though, and send in Boris to at the very least rout off these guys. Big misplay with my caster though, he definitely should not have dived in so far. As for Boris, let's see if I can get the terror route. Oh, but perhaps an ITP aura saving these guys. I'm gonna have to evacuate Boris instead. Thankfully he didn't take too much damage. And we'll see if the great swords are able to carry here. Some shots into these dwarf warriors should help me out. But honestly, it seems like my ammunition usage, I might have wasted too much here. And Ungrim could pose a pretty big problem in the late game. Still, we will continue to play this out, seeing if I can win this. I do have some units of cavalry that could possibly charge into these dwarf warriors, but it does seem like I'm not able to finish these guys off, and that's going to be very bad for me. Unfortunately, it seems that despite the kiting, it seems like Ice Power will be coming out on top, possibly. But we'll have to see. The dwarf warriors, they will be routing off, and that will be helping me out. Not to mention Boris can deal with Ungrim. And with one good volley, I should still be able to rout off the forces. So I don't think it's completely over yet. And in fact, I can actually get a bit of a gun line going to finish off Ungrim here. But I will have to be a bit delicate to make sure that this is handled properly. So he does his attack animation, and then the gun line does fire. It does get him fairly low on HP, which is very good. And I do still have a couple shots left. Given how much damage he took, I think I'm actually in a decent position. But Boris will have to finish off this Runesmith by the looks of it. As for the Slayers, they aren't nearly as much of a problem, since I can bog them down with infantry. These Dwarf Warrior are great weapons, though I definitely don't want them coming back. So we'll be pulling Boris away to make sure that I chase them down. And with that one volley, really, I did really good damage against Ungrim. So I'm actually feeling much more confident once again. So let's get these Thunderers lined up. Firing line on top of Ungrim. And see if they can get their shots off. There we go, a nice volley. And then pulling these guys into melee now that they're out of ammo. As for this last unit of handgunners, it's going to be up to them to try and win the game here. And it's going to be very close. I can say that right now, guys. Let's see here. The Slayers are more or less dead, which is very good for me. Let's get these handgunners into combat against them too. And then these handgunners, with their last 5 shots, they're gonna have to kill off Ungrim Iron Fist. The Slayer King himself. It's going to be a bit of a task, but I trust that they'll be able to do it. These Slayers will get chased down, so that's no problem for me. And let's just get these handgunners into position to fire away at Ungrim as soon as he gets a little bit more exposed. Now I don't want to get too close to him, otherwise he will be able to actually catch the handgunners. And I do really want to finish off the Slayers though. As for Boris, it's a bit too risky to send him into combat right now, so I won't. And here we go, the shot does come out. And actually quite a bit of misses there, with some nice juking from Ice Power. So I will have to sort of reposition, make sure I have infantry nearby to body block for my handgunners if needed. And then they will get another volley off and hopefully take Ungrim down another notch. So at a little bit of a closer distance, he will have a harder time dodging. Although you do see most of the shots still miss. Not great for me, and ammunition is running low. I am down to 3 shots now, and these handgunners will not really be able to kill him by the looks of it. So I will have to do some shenanigans to actually pin these guys down. To do that, it's going to be sending in these crossbowmen, sort of painting an attack, trying to get Ungrim to use his attack animation. And there we go, there's the attack animation, and that means that he won't be able to dodge nearly as well. And that handgunner volley did quite a bit more damage, so sort of trading a bit of HP here, and I'm fine with that, since it does mean that these handgunners will be able to do a bit more damage. Whoops, let's not shoot. Oh, they shot. That's bad. A little bit of a waste of ammunition there. Not the greatest, but otherwise still okay. As I do still have 2 shots left. Enough to get Ungrim very low. But we'll have to see. Oh, it looks like these Dwarf Warriors do come back too. but I can take my time just to rout them off, and just by looking at them, they do run away. So that's very good for me. And here we go. Here we go. This is what the game has come down to. I might be able to get some cycle charges with Boris here, but we'll have to see. We'll have to see. If only I saved a little bit more ammunition, but I think it should be fine. Now what I can do to save these guys, I can halt movement on these handgunners, and Ice Power is going to dodge with his heroes, and that will save me a little bit of time on my crossbowmen. And then I can halt with these handgunners again to sort of get these guys to dodge. Actually, and I can't cycle charge here, so I'm not actually going to engage with Boris just yet. It looks like he will be wanting to chase off my troops off the battlefield, and it seems like he will be able to catch them with the speed of his heroes. But this battle will take a while. 5-hour stream when? Well, hopefully once we get the DLC actually out, I will be able to play in more tournaments, and that'll be very exciting. All right, now Ungrim. Ungrim. Will I be able to land Boris here? It seems like a bad idea. If I could just get some infantry engaged, that would be very good for me, but honestly, we might just have to wait this battle out, because I don't think it's worth landing Boris here. He could get a free hit on Ungrim, and it could save these crossbowmen, but they're at such low HP, I just don't think it's worth it. You kind of thought the great swords would come back? Yeah, actually. The fact that they fled the battlefield entirely sort of sucks for me. Not the best situation, but we will make do. All right, now these guys, they're speedy. They got 32 speed to the 30 speed of my crossbowmen. Oh, look at that. We got handgunners back. Amazing. Get these guys back in the fight. Two manlets are too scary. Apparently so, but here we go. The tides have turned. These crossbowmen, heroes of the Empire, will be traveling back to save these crossbowmen. Absolute heroes to stall out the dwarves. What? Alright, well, rip those guys. You know what? I'm just gonna finish off these longbeards. And then we'll be able to get into the final battle, where I do still have 2 shots of ammunition left to deal with the rest of the army. Alright, there we go. So we chased off those dwarf warriors. I don't want to sit around and gain vigor, because that would be a little bit BM. And instead I will be traveling forwards to get into a nice gunning position. There's no hills here, so that will play to my advantage. And that should help me out. All right, ice power. Moving to the other side of the hill now. See if I can get me a nice shooting position here. And then should be good to go. So the idea is I need them to get a melee attack on these handgunners so that I can get my actual volleys off. The fact that he was able to dodge a few of the volleys is actually going to be fairly big here. But I think I should still be fine. And here we go. Very important positioning. Will I be able to finish off Ungrim here? He's going for the jukes. He's trying to get into melee. But I will be positioning very close here. And that means that he shouldn't be able to dodge. There we go. That's a pretty good volley. Quite a few hits right off the bat. Boris could hit this runesmith, but he doesn't. And then let's go ahead and get here. And this should be the last volley. As soon as these handgunners rout off. And there we go. There's the last volley. And now I simply have to kill off Ungrim with Boris. A charge in and an attack. Ooh, but Ungrim lands his attack. And I think that might be it for poor Boris. Oh, thankfully I do get a miss. And I do have to remember, he does have the rune of speed that will be pretty scary here. Boris is going to land again and try and take out Ungrim, but it seems like Ice Power's control dodging the shots is gonna be able to win the game here, despite all odds. But wow, Boris actually took Ungrim down to 200 HP. Oh man, but the misplays. I definitely felt too safe, and I wasted some shots. As you can see, if I had only one more volley off on Ungrim, I could have won it. Plus, I lost my Sorcerer, my Bright Wizard, to some Slayers. And that was obviously the big misplay. Otherwise, I definitely would have won it. But there we go. Still a very fun build. And GG and well played to Ice Power. I know it was so close. If I didn't throw away my Bright Wizard, it would have been such an easy win. It would have been so easy. Oh man, but that's what happens. That is what happens. Or if I didn't waste those shots at long range, I could have played a lot safer there. But everyone makes misplays on both sides of the battle when you lose, so it's not too much to get upset about. Now, next up, Ice Power is going to be picking his faction, and we'll see how that goes. What a scrap indeed. Oh my gosh, I should save that replay to cast later. Yeah, so I was thinking, I sort of want to get back into posting videos regularly, but not like full 3-hour streams. Instead, I might just be casting single games that I get while I practice. Because before, I would be practicing a lot of, I really want to still practice a lot with my clanmates, but I really want to actually be putting out videos too. But streaming full practice sessions with ODM obviously isn't great for their own tournament play, and they don't want to show off all of their cool builds. So I think this should be a happy medium, and in the future it should be nice. Plus, with the release of Warhammer 3, whenever it drops, it's gonna be good, I think. Hopefully. Man, what a scrap though. What a scrap. And the next map is Prague. Very good. Very, very good. But what is Ice Power going to go for? I imagine he might... I'm not sure. Maybe he'll play the new Lizardmen. Maybe he'll play Coast or something. If he does play Coast, Lizardmen's actually a fairly strong pick nowadays. I wouldn't be too afraid of that. He wouldn't have to worry about Empire, but... Lizardmen is a scary force to be reckoned with. Ice Power considering his options. Perhaps he will go for the classic Dark Elves. Or perhaps he will play another faction. I think the chances of him going Dark Elves is medium, since this isn't a very high stakes tournament. And there we go. Dark Elves indeed, banning the Greenskins and the Wood Elves. Very good picks. Now I get to choose. I could go Beastmen, but let's see. He's definitely going to go for the double Manticore play. That I can almost count on as a guarantee. I could go for Dwarves, and he likely wouldn't go for that playstyle. And that's not a terrible matchup for me. It's one that I feel decently comfortable with too, but interestingly enough, he doesn't ban Bretonia. And it feels like a bait. Perhaps he has a build, but if he does, I'd be interested to see it. Is this what I will do? Bretonia against his Dark Elves? It's that or Skaven, which could go very badly if I don't do it right. Sure, let's go Bretonia, why not? The map is flat. I'm sure the shenanigans will be fairly low. And the fact that I have Enchantress double Paladin means that 2 Manticores is gonna be less scary than one might expect. So the main thing here is that I do have the general advantage here in Cavalry. I do have some trebuchets here to help against defensive box formations too. Of course, it could get sniped out with some fireball spam, but since Ice Power generally doesn't take too many fireballs, I could actually cut a trebuchet to go for a few different units here. Possibly some mounted yeoman archers to assist in... Actually, yeah, I could go for yeoman archers here. These guys are pretty nice because they actually can help me fight manticores easily without getting picked off, as opposed to the peasant bowman. I'm not worried about fireballs from ice power because he doesn't play them as often, so I don't need to field as many trebuchets against a box. If he does go for bolt throwers of himself, that could pose a problem here for the trebuchets, and then a box could potentially ruin my day here. But of course I do still have the Fey Enchantress, so this feels like I should be okay here. If he does go for Scourge Runners though, it could be a little bit scary. This is a best of 7 and this is game 2. In fact, let's open up the scores and actually put that up so that you guys know what's going on. Ice Power at 1 win, defeating my empire with dwarves. Shameful display for me, but still fine. Now, Scourge Runners, generally you just run them out of ammunition. If he does go for a full kite, I do have yeoman archers, which will be helping me out a lot more than other units. Potentially I could also take the poison variant, and they could do okay. I'm very tempted to do so, but I don't want to get ruined by a box too hard, so I think this will be my build. That's right, no Grail Knights. I prefer questing knights personally. Plus I think Ice Power prefers, he likes his Scourge Runners, and I wouldn't want to just run into them with Grail Knights unless for whatever reason they can survive Scourge Runner shots, in which case they would be pretty good. But this game is all going to be about dodging, very likely, much like the last game actually. Lots of maneuvering and so on. Poison got nerfed, that is true. It is now 15% instead of 20% stat debuffs. A decent nerf, but nothing that'll blow your mind really. And with the army set up, I think I am more or less ready. I will have the Knights Errant in the back defending the 2 trebuchet positions. I will put them slightly closer to each other because the goal is to keep them both safe with these Knights Errant, and I don't think anything is going to make a mad dive on top of both without getting absolutely murdered by my cavalry. So that's usually the idea when I spread out my artillery versus putting them close together. It depends on how well you can defend them in a straight up fight, or if you want to split your opponent's forces. Now the mounted yeomen, they will be positioned forwards and actually turn to their side. This will help them dodge the first shot of Scourge Runner fire if it does drop. Fey Enchantress is unnerfed as far as I know, so she should be fine. And with all that set up, I think we are ready to go. Hope he has no warlocks. What, against my questing knights? As long as I don't clump them up, I think I'll be okay. I guess if he goes for warlock spam, maybe they will win the cavalry fight. Not something that I actually have experienced before, so at the very least it will be a learning experience, Loopy. So this time he went Dark Elves. He banned the Wood Elves and the Greenskins, and then I went Bretonia. It looks like Ice Power is ready. And here we go! The battle begins. He has a fairly standard looking army, but he does have the dreaded Cold One Chariot, Scourge Runners I mean. So they're going to be a little bit scary. Mounted Yeomen can get into position, and oh, look at that. He's going for his Dark Shard favorite. That's pretty cool. Ice Power, of course, he is a fan of Dark Shards. And these Mounted Yeomen, I'm going to turn Fire at Will off since Marathi can usually dodge. But, no, these guys probably won't be running out of ammo, so I think it's fine to be firing away. And it looks like it actually does get some pretty nice damage onto Marathi. It's very good for me. And now I can use my cavalry advantage to push forwards. Here we go. Dark Shards are firing away. We'll see if I can dodge. Looks like I actually take a pretty nasty hit. But with how much damage Marathi has taken, I'm feeling fairly good right now. I think that's a Soul Stealer dropping onto my 2 Paladins. It's very interesting. It does actually connect, and I'll counter that with a bit of a heal. And now I can start getting my cavalry to slam into these red bleak swords. And then I should be fine. So here we go. Just flying in, using these questing knights to get some nice damage off. And then otherwise, mostly just ignoring most of these fights. I don't really want to be engaging these guys too hard. And it looks like my trebuchets are still poking away at these Cold One Knights, so that's very good for me. It means that my cavalry doesn't need to be in nearly as good shape to win these fights. And that is very, very important for me. So these mounted yeomen archers, they are going to be continuing to punish these feral manticores as much as they can. Some Cold One Knights do come in, but I don't want to group up too much because you can see Soul Stealer will be dropping, and it will actually be getting some pretty nice damage too onto my forces. It's not great for me. And oh man, that was a really nasty blob. That's a really, really nasty blob. We'll see if I can recover from this though. I do still have 2 paladins in the air. They are now fighting manticores with peasant archer support, which is definitely good for them, but man, that was a huge hit. These dark shards too may fire away at me, and we'll see how well I can do here. I do still have these knights errant that could assist, but at the moment I'm just running away from these 2 manticores. I don't really want to be engaging them just yet. These knights errant, they will need to be activated though. It seems like my questing knight force has been quite brutalized though, and that has me a little bit worried. In fact, I think Ice Power might be able to take the win here unless I'm able to really secure better cavalry advantage. But he does still have quite a few Cold One Knights left. I do have peasant archers though, and I have managed to rout off one of the manticores, which is fairly big. I do still have the questing knights, and a few of my forces are beginning to rally now, which should do me quite well. The paladins, they're having a bit of a rough time. Some Cold One Knights have pulled to the side here, and I don't want to fight them near these dark shards, as that would get them extremely good value against my knights. In the meantime, I'm just continuing to pull around and retreat as much as I can. Another Soul Stealer does drop. That is going to be punishing my paladins most likely. Ooh, and it just barely clips them. They do get caught there, unfortunately, but I do still have some forces of cavalry here, and hopefully they're able to pull through. If I do manage to take out these archers, I will be able to secure some air superiority as long as my paladins don't get too beat up. But with these constant Soul Stealers, it does seem like Ice Power will be able to win out the main engagement here, although potentially a mistake. The Manticore sort of landing on the ground here. I will be throwing down a slow on top of it, and then trying to shut down his ranged units to actually take these guys out. But the paladins are very beat up. There's no guarantee that they will be able to take out the Manticore, and surrounded by spears, I think Ice Power will be able to win this one, thanks to some really nasty Soul Stealer plays. I thought the cooldown was longer and I walked into it, and that will be ending the game most likely. So GG, well played to Ice Power. That will be defeating my Bretonia, and we will be moving on to game number 3. Very nice plays from Ice Power today. Although I think the first game was definitely really close. The second game was a really nice Dark Elf showcase. I think the big problem here, just eating those Soul Stealers constantly was a terrible idea. All my cavalry didn't trade out well when questing knights should be winning against Cold One Knights. The idea is you need to spread out your cavalry more, and I will need to keep that in mind for the next game. So GG, and now I move on to my next faction. I've banned Lizardmen and Bretonia. He's played Dark Elves. He has played he's played Bretonia. Let's see, is there any faction that fears Bretonia? I could go possibly for one of the elves, but thinking it's about time I take out the new Lizardmen for a spin. Potentially these guys could do amazingly, and we'll be trying them out. So Lizardmen, And let's see here, banning. Let's see, I'm not very worried about Skaven at all. Not worried about Bretonia or the elves. I'll probably ban the Beastmen though. And is there anything else Lizardmen really fear nowadays? Like what? Beastmen, Tomb Kings, potentially? Am I worried about the dwarves? He already played dwarves, so that's fine. Yeah, so he played dwarves. He does still have Bretonia, but I think Lizardmen ban Beastmen and something else will be pretty good for me. He could even play Greenskins. If he manages to win that, that would be a huge, huge bonus for him. Alternatively, Norska, possibly, but I don't think they're very scary either. I'll ban, possibly Chaos. But, maybe Chaos? I'm not sure. Let's see here. I think Beastmen for sure. Followed with not Skaven, not Vampire Coast, Beastmen, and I guess Chaos or Greenskins. Sure, I'll ban Beastmen Chaos. Let's try this out. I'm pretty comfortable with Empire. The fact that it's Troll Country too means that it's gonna be a rush fest. So Lizardmen are pretty nice in this situation. But let's see. I'm very tempted to bring Oxyotl. If there's a good place for me to bring him, I will take him. And Ice Power is considering his options. But if it's gonna be a rush faction, this guy should do very well. Chameleon Stalkers will deal with most hard matchups against Coast and Skaven. So if he goes for that, I'd be fairly happy. And of course, we also have the Arc of Sotek if you want to be winning against infantry. But against single entities, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what we would do for single entities. I could go for some Troglodons, which are nice, but they still don't really want to see a big fight. However, I could go for a Skink Oracle and then a Carnosaur. No, I can't because of the single entity limit. So I'd probably cut an Arc of Sotek. But so far, this seems pretty good. Just as a base, you know, you got Fireball Spam, Earthbloods. The Skink Oracle is absolutely great. Of course, I could take some Saurus Warriors too, since it is a close map. And I will likely have to go up into a straight up fight eventually. Some Skink Cohort Javelins to deal with single entities. Oh, but he's hovering the vampire counts. If he's gonna play them, I'm gonna go Arcs of Sotek. 100%. Why those bans? Because I'm not really worried about anything else. I personally am pretty inexperienced against in monster fights as Lizardmen. And those two factions are most likely currently to see monster fights. It's something I need to work on more eventually, but for now, I'm still a bit inexperienced on that front. Let's see what else. This feels like a decent army already. Ooh, he's considering Tomb Kings. Potentially another thing that could be very scary. Now I'm wondering if Troglodons can beat Ushopti there. But most likely I would be rushing if that was the situation. I could even rush with Arcs of Sotek to deal with the infantry a bit faster. Which honestly wouldn't be a terrible choice. I still have to shut down the Ushopti, but that's not too difficult. Hey, and there we go. He does go for the Tomb King. Sweet. So the general idea here, I will be trying to rush down some Ushopti. I will be using Oxyotl to snipe away at his lords. That should be very annoying. And of course I have the Skink Oracle to defend. I have the Carnosaur and the Arc of Sotek. A cheap option to melt down any Tomb Guard. And boy oh boy will it, with that Poison Wind Mortar effect. I will then go for 5 Chameleon Stalkers, as they are amazing now at, or they are an amazing unit at just causing pure disruption and shutting down range units while killing chaff. Basically the perfect unit for this situation against the Tomb Kings. Not to mention Razordon hunting packs are much cheaper now, but I don't want them to get Soul Stealered, so I will be avoiding those guys. For the rest of my army, likely I will be taking some cheap forces. In fact, I don't even know if I need the Carnosaur here. I could go for a Scar Veteran for a little bit of extra leadership instead. But of course that does put a little bit more of a price on his head. And maybe not exactly something that I want to be doing. So let's see. I could also take a Coatl, but I am maxed out on single entity monsters, so I actually can't take it. And I think it's just, it's probably infantry that I want the most of. These guys will do well against Nehekara horsemen, so I'm not worried on that front. And you know what, I will take away the Scarvet, take in a Carnosaur, and go for some red-crested skink action. These guys, I'm hoping they will be able to deal with the mobility of the Tomb Kings and allow me to essentially get some proper engagements going. But oh, I'm not sure. I feel like I need a little bit more mass, you know? Like maybe some Croxagores or something, because a ton of mobility would be quite scary against a full skink build. Of course, these Chameleon Stalkers are good, but whether they are good enough is yet to be seen. Darn it, and I still have 3 gold extra. I will want to take Wind Blast. Only 3 single entity monsters in competitive, that's correct. It's been found that single entity monsters en masse can be pretty cheesy. And to tone it down, it's been limited to simply 3. Ah, yes, I need to take the ROR Red Crested Skinks. Yes, that is very important. So I will take that guy. And then maybe if I cut one of these Chameleon Stalkers, I can fit in more Red Cresteds. Yeah, this seems like a build. Sure, let's go ahead and do this. Red Crested Skinks, Arcs of Sotek. We have tons of anti-infantry, and then Oxyotl to kite out the forces of the Tomb Kings in the late game. Are Tomb King chariots even better now? I don't think they got changed, but I can't confirm. So they may or may not have been changed. We will see. But cool, I'm pretty interested to see how this plays out. I do have a good amount of healing, and I don't have any Slans to be sniped out. I do have my my Troglodon though, that I will want to make sure stays safe. And of course the Carnosaur, but given that it's more mobile, I'm not as afraid in that situation. Oxyotl can go ahead and position front and center. Deal with the more mobile Tomb King's forces. I got these Chameleon Skinks, and then it's going to be a red-crested skink infantry line. This should be a pretty fun game. The goal is to win the infantry fight, and then the monster fight will be much easier once the Ushapti are shut down. This build is fairly well tuned to win against infantry. So I feel like I'm in an okay place, but we'll have to see. Good luck, have fun to Ice Power. And let's see if he manages to win this one. If he does, I will be put in a pretty bad situation, losing all the games today. But we've only lost 2, so we're not out of it yet. Are Tomb King chariots even better now? Let's see, I already answered that. Could there be builds with Nakai and the Coatl stock with the Coatl stock ability? Like possibly, but it always feels like there's better options than Nakai. Unless Nakai got some buffs that I haven't seen yet. I'm not too hyped about him, to be honest. All chariots seem to have a mass buff. Well, that would be good for the Tomb King chariots, but here we go. The battle begins. We do see some Ushapti Great Bow, and this is more or less exactly what we were expecting. I will go stock mode with my lord, and he's going to go ahead and fire in a shot at these Ushapti Great Bow just to start off, to see how well he can take out models. And right off the bat, he takes out none. So not a great start right off the bat. But let's go ahead and get these Chameleon Stalkers in. And then this guy, he can start sniping out a few targets. Here we go. The bombs are flying. And we'll see how well they do versus these chariots. It seems so far they're only doing decently. Nothing too crazy so far. Although it's decent damage. And now Arkin the Black does reveal himself. And I will be trying to shut him down now. So I do have a few skinks that are making it through into the back line. This Troglodon is dodging the Oxyotl fire as much as he can. Arkin the Black gets a fairly nice summon. And I will need to move in these Chameleon Stalkers now. Now the bombs do well against the chariots. But I am sort of microing this not as well as I would have hoped. Still though, let's see, how's Oxyotl doing? He's doing decently. And I do have some Chameleon Stalkers now in the backline, but they will be getting shut down by these Nehekara horsemen, which is not great for me. Oxyotl, he's still doing decently. And the Carnosaur, he needs to be diving in more onto these chariots, I think. Still though, as long as I can deal with these Oxyotl, I'll be feeling much better. And I am going to use the Bastiladon's ability there to start killing these skeletons and then pushing out while using this guy to shut down some Oxyotl. Oxyotl is still safe and okay. And the Carnosaur can push through towards Arkin the Black also. But so far, this mass chariot style is being a little bit of a problem. And unless I can shut them down, it seems like this may also be a loss, unfortunately. But let's continue pushing forwards. I do still have the Arc of Sotek that does have its mass to push through. My Chameleon Stalker, he's doing okay, but he's gonna have to push forwards past these Oxyotl. And I don't think he will be able to get through, but actually he does manage it. Although the Oxyotl are still firing in on top of him. But man, oh man, there's just too much mass, and the mass chariot play looks like it will be shutting me down here, unfortunately. Although I will continue playing it out. There is a chance that I will be able to close out the battle if my monsters can survive in this fight. But Arkin the Black, he is chasing off my Caster Lord now, which is definitely very bad. There is still a lot of infantry, and it seems like it will come down to the Arc of Sotek and his abilities. But honestly, I just simply was not able to deal with the chariots, and that's going to be GG. I forgot to call it. GG, well played. And that's going to be that. So the Chameleon Stalker is doing much worse against chariots than I would have thought, unfortunately. But if we take a look at their values, they only did okay, and the Red Crested really did badly here. Unfortunately, with 4 chariots on the battlefield, it was not going to help them out, and it seems like Ice Power was ready for that, and simply could close out the game easily there. So GG. Have we went over the Stalk Bug and Cavalry Infantry interaction? Cavalry Infantry seems about the same, Stalk Bug is untested. But there we go, Ice Power with 3 wins now. Will I be able to pull it back? We will have to see. And unfortunately, yeah, those Chameleon Stalkers did real bad against the chariots. I was really hoping they would shut them down. But the Tomb King chariots do have a lot of models, and it seems like that was a bad idea. I think if I were to change it up, maybe I would go for the usual Pterodon playstyle here instead. But this build doesn't work without anti-chariot defense. Alternatively, I could go for a big monster blob, but I don't think that actually helps me catch those guys. The Oxyotl Great Bows, unfortunately. So GG. Again, agree Hadri's maybe more of a backline defense, not offense. Yeah. It was a good test though. It was a good test, but very unfortunate. Because I do want to put in at least 1 game today. Let's not get only losses. So cool. Now let's see, I think Ice Power is picking next, and I will get the counter pick, which does give me a much higher chance of winning, presumably, but we'll have to see. I am down some pretty nice factions for counters. There's no Lizardmen, There's no Bretonia for me, and there's no Empire. The answer is always more Bastiladons. Yep, just solar engine spam. Another important test. Oxyotl. He does have a ranged attack that is good at sniping monsters, but it only works at closer range. So if Ice Power had gone for, let's say, Cetra or something, this would have done much better, but it's actually really bad against Ushopti at max range. So you do have to be a bit careful there. Arc of Sotek could actually be good. Now I'm wondering, because if Tomb Kings do go for a lot of infantry, perhaps, but most of the time it is chaff, and you're trying to shut down those Ushopti as quickly as you can. I'm wondering now, if I had just gone for something simple like, if I went like, you know, Saurus spam, plus some Croxagors, perhaps. Like something like this could actually be a decent build against that, since the Ushopti simply do not have enough firepower to kill everything. But we'll have to test it out next time. Does Beastmen have any bad matchups still anymore? It depends. If you're using their more broken units like the Wargors, perhaps not. But right now Beastmen are shaping up to be a lot like Lizardmen, where they have decent skirmishing options and very strong single entity fights. The fact that they have monstrous units to support is pretty big too. So I think Beastmen will be very meta now. I think, yeah, unless they get some crazy nerfs, even without chariots, I think Beastmen are very strong. But that's about it. And there we go. Empire banned the dwarves and the vampire counts. Okay. So I don't have Lizardmen in this situation. I can go for Beastmen, although I also do not have Bretonia. Greenskins is an option, but I don't want to go against Ice Power's Greenskins. And alternatively, let's see, perhaps a Chaos pick, but honestly, I think Beastmen are the fun option here. And we'll see if they're able to do well here. They don't do especially better versus Empire, but I'm not sure. Against a full-on kite build, I do have the usual mobility options. So let's see. I think Empire Kite can still be pretty scary here. Of course, Malagor is a lot faster now, and that could be pretty big. He has a Cygor summon. He has a crazy single target buff that I don't think will be used very often, but who knows? It is very close to Occam's Mind Razor, so it's perhaps decent. Flock of Doom, I probably won't be taking, but maybe an enfeebling foe, perhaps. Although Pendulum Cygor summon feels like the best. Okay, so Ice Power. We're figuring out which units we want to ban because these guys are pretty busted. I think we both agree on that front. ECL, I'm not sure. You have to we'll wait on that. I'm not sure if there's any public news on ECL yet. I think last it was scheduled was tomorrow, but there may or may not be changes there. Okay, now I do feel like a kite is likely because Empire do not want to go up against Beastmen in a straight up fight, at least I would assume not. So going for 4 skirmishers and some poison warhounds is a fairly good bet. Some Centaurs don't really hurt either, plus the magic damage one could be fairly strong. and it seems like ice power is cool with the multi-entity chariots. I'm tempted to take 2 and then stop at there because a lot of kite options will generally do well in that area. Now for the abilities on Mogre, he does have a ton of them, and for now I'll just take all of them. It could be a little bit inefficient, but I'm more or less fine on that front. And now we go ahead and set up the rest of the army. So I have my cavalry, I have my mobility. That's all fairly well set. Next up, I could go for the Butchers of Kalkengard for a nice way of pushing through the front line, but the Jabberslythe could be very potent too at disrupting formations. We saw that it was very strong there, but I do not want to get it sniped as it is extremely expensive. I will, however, take 1 though and use that to push into the Empire backline while bringing in a fairly small amount of infantry, I think, since I already have chariots and the Jabberslythe. Any interesting finds so far? If you go to the VOD of this video, you will be able to see all the various discussion that I went over. There were some interesting units, some fun testing, but that's about it. Now I could cut, I do want to cut some units to get a bit more infantry. Perhaps I don't need the second unit of Centaurs, since I already have these throwing axes. But if I have the chariots distracting the... If he goes for an Empire box defensive formation, these chariots will be distracting his cavalry for the most part. And I actually won't need these Centaur throwing axes nearly as much. And instead I can go for a build like this that more so has a bit more infantry. I got some single entity power in the Jabberslythe, and Karl Franz will die to these Centaurs as long as I manage to keep them safe. Malagor will be in the air, but he's fast enough to run away from Franz, so I am not too worried about him. And we can try out this battle to see how well we do. If we lose, it would be pretty anticlimactic, but I guess if it does end in an 0-4, it does mean that this day will end a little bit earlier than expected. You hope for some cool new infantry for Beastmen. Actually, yeah, they didn't get any infantry, but most people wanted the big monsters, I think. So I don't think it's too disappointing. Yeah, and you can go for something other than Mogre. You can go for various caster lords, Malagor, and possibly Taurox, depending on how he shapes up. So far, he seems like an okay lord, but the fact that he isn't a devastating combat lord has me a little bit worried for him, as you do want to be fairly strong in combat to do well. But anyways, let's see, his army size is fairly large, which means I can deploy forwards here. I do have my Centaurs and my dogs to deal with cavalry, and I think I will split up these forces. Jabberslythe will be behind this tiny hill here, and he'll be doing his best to disrupt the handgunner formations and avoiding Franz as much as possible, while my chariots will be doing basically the exact same thing. In fact, I will put them all on the same hotkey group, and with that, we can dive into the game. Very exciting. Now, let's see. Of course, things could still go terribly wrong here. I think the worst thing that could happen is if my Jabberslythe and chariots get fully shut down. Of course, we do not want to have them jumped by Franz or surrounded by cavalry. But if there are a ton of like counters to these types of units, I will be hanging around closer to the front line to make sure that they can be supported by the Centaur throwing axes. That's the general plan. And here we go. It seems like the army is going to be fairly standard, just box formation. We got Volkmar the Grim and some Empire Knights by the looks of it. 4 of which, interesting, handgunners. They are around, and I will begin getting in position to flank. My cavalry, I feel confident enough with them, where I'm okay splitting them up. The Empire Knights will be a little bit annoying, but because I have these Centaurs, I'm not nearly as worried on that front. Jabberslythe will be taking more to the center, And ice power, he is just forming up into a nice position. Now, I don't want to go too hard on the flanking. There is still a lot of cavalry here. So I will have to be a little bit careful, but we can get underway now and simply get the infantry into combat while pulling back with the mobility for now so that they don't get shot up too much. Here we go. Handgunner should be firing soon. But it looks like they do pull back. And now that they're in position, I will throw down a pendulum to try and disrupt them. Jabberslythe is moving in. And now comes the big engagement. So I need my chariots to dive in on top of the handgunners. Jabberslythe did take a lot of damage so far, actually. That's a bit of a misplay. But Malagor, he can move in and start getting in some work on top of these handgunners using... Man, I forgot my cavalry. That's really bad. Using a Cygor summon. The Jabberslythe, it looks like it's doing fairly well for itself, although I do get my hounds caught a little bit by these forces. My chariots too are getting bogged down a little bit, and that does mean that the Jabberslythe is taking a lot more damage than I would hope. But it's not an end game scenario just yet for it. Although I have forgone a lot of my cavalry, which is definitely very painful for me. But still, just pulling away the Jabberslythe so that it does not take too much damage here from the forces of the Empire. Avoiding getting surrounded by cavalry. And with my chariots finally getting into the back line, that should be helping me out. Although I definitely mistimed that engagement a little bit, and I will be punished for that. At least a decent amount. That's very unfortunate, but we will continue trekking on. Let's get these chariots in and charging the infantry. This is a high micro situation. And we'll see how much I can shut down here. Jabberslythe is trying to move back in now that most of the guns are actually shut down. And with the big pendulum, I feel like I should be able to take out quite a few of these units here. I still have my mobility, which is great for me. And let's see, the Centaurs are sort of distracting the knights. The Jabberslythe is jumping around. And potentially this game could go well for me. But I'm still a little bit unsure. Let's see here. Where are the other units of handgunners? So over here, Jabberslythe will be able to dive in on top of them and shut them down. And there we go. Thankfully, its attack animations are crazy. And as long as I keep it moving, I will be feeling a little bit safer here. This Firecaster, though, I will need to find a way to deal with him for sure, as I definitely do not want to be getting shut down by fireball spam or anything. But Malagor, he does do fairly well in this situation. He can actually dive in directly on top of them, and hopefully that will buy me some time for my chariots to get in on the fight. The Jabberslythe is still doing very well here, which is great for me, but the balance of power, it is beginning to get a little bit close. However, with all the guns actually shut down, I do have a bit of potential to do well here. However, there are still quite a few units of cavalry that I will have to worry about. Taking a look over here, these Empire Knights could potentially be a problem. Seems like my chariots are still doing great versus the infantry though. And the fact that my Centaur throwing axes are doing well is definitely great for me. Let's go ahead and send the dogs on the handgunners now. And then the next goal is going to be dealing with all the cavalry. Once we come down to just infantry, I will be feeling much more comfortable here. Ooh, but actually I lose a unit of Centaurs. That's very bad. We'll see if I can recover from that. Jabberslythe still jumping around. I do still have my chariots. But the balance of power has gone in the favor of ice power, unfortunately. And if we take a look at the ammunition on these Centaurs, it is starting to get fairly low. As for Malagor, he can... oh no, my chariots! That's very bad. I actually get one of my chariots caught. That will result in the infantry being a little bit more scary for the Empire. And that is actually very bad. I needed those chariots to do well for me. But I do still have a unit of Centaurs, thankfully. The mobility for the Empire forces is down to about 1 unit of cavalry left. These handgunners could be a little bit annoying, but nothing too problematic, I don't think. And of course, I do still have the Jabberslythe to cycle charge the infantry. Volkmar will be a little bit scary, as I don't have a ton of single entity killing strength. And if something's going to end me this game, I think that will likely be it. But we will continue scrapping it out as best as we can. Malagor will be going in onto these handgunners. Actually, I'm going to send my other forces instead. And then these Centaur throwing axes will be doing their best. I do still have a unit of chariots too. They thankfully rallied, which means that we've come down to a game against basically just all infantry for the Empire, except for these single units of knights. It's a fairly decent situation. The Jabberslythe has it does have a mortis effect for low leadership units, but wisely we have seen Ice Power go for tons and tons of infantry that are unbreakable in this situation, and that will actually be helping them out quite a bit. So we will see if they how well they manage to do here. Some throwing axes going into these Empire Knights. If I can finish them off, of course that would be good, but the time has come where essentially we just have to engage here with our melee troops, and I will dive in first onto these spearmen, most likely to try and take them out. Possibly these swords of Sigmar, but here we go. Let's see if let's see how much damage we can do. A nice pull from Ice Power does rout off some of my cavalry. The Jabberslythe, it is in a safe-ish position. I will be able to get some nice charges onto these guys, and of course I do still have a Cygor summon. Could potentially do well. It seems like a Burning Head does drop though. It will be hitting my Centaurs, but doesn't get too much damage in. However, the Jabberslythe is pretty beat up now, and that's going to be very bad. And unless I can take out Volkmar here, I don't think I'll be able to take out the win. However, I will send in my forces on top of him. I do have a Cygor summon too, and that will be trying to take him out. But given that all these guys have high leadership, I think Ice Power might be able to win it. The Knights do rout off, but so does the Jabberslythe. Volkmar does manage to disengage away from the Cygor, which is very good for him. And although we had some good games, I think Ice Power got a pretty decisive victory for himself today. Let's go ahead and continue trying to snipe Volkmar though. The Malagor is infantry sides, so he will be going down a bit faster against them. And it seems like that will be it, unfortunately. Oh man, what decisive victories for Ice Power, unless I get some really lucky hits here. And that is going to be the plan. Jabberslythe does come back, potentially could knock down a lot of these infantry units. But there we go, Malagor is out. And that's going to be it. Ice Power takes the 4th win. Decisive 4-0 victory for Ice Power. Very unfortunate that I wasn't able to get in more games, but it happens. And that will be it for today. GG. And in the end, let's see here. I think really the biggest part was that I couldn't shut down these handgunners as quickly. I had a really bad attack timing there with my left flank, and they actually didn't move in onto the Empire lines as quickly as I would have wanted. But I think Ice Power played that very well. Volkmar did quite well for himself, and going for unbreakable units was very good against the Jabberslythe. Perhaps if I went for the Ghorgon next time, it could have done better, especially against Volkmar, but I think with the volume of fire, it would have more or less gone the same. How is Biblington a mod everywhere? Well, simply by being everywhere. That is the strat, but there we go. GG's. And I shall begin closing out the stream. So thank you very much, guys, for tuning in today. I hope that the information was informative. I think we had a good showcasing of many of the new units. And although they didn't do as well as we would have hoped, I think the DLC is still very exciting. Although that is not an official review. So there we go. And now I simply have to wait up for the stream to catch up, and I can close it out.